All right. Welcome everyone to today's Skill Up. My name's Dr. Emily Sranger, and I am joined by Dr. Matt Vaartstra today, who is going to be talking to you as a member from our Career Service Department at National University. And just as a friendly reminder in this series, we do encourage you to have conversation in the chat or ask your questions in the chat. We also do have a Q&A function of the Zoom. You're welcome to put your questions in there as well. If you do have other questions that maybe we don't get to in today's session, let's make sure that you're directing them to our NU Career Services Department at National University. Dr. Vaartstra, I think that about covers some of the items I wanted to make sure we were able to address in the very beginning. So if anyone needs me, you're welcome to find me in the chat, but I am going to turn you over to the expert for today's session, Dr. Matt Vaartstra.
Thank you, Emily. I'm happy to be here. Welcome in, everybody. Thanks for committing to spending some time with us today. I'm excited to share with you about landing an interview through a tailored resume. So our focus is going to be around resumes, resume building. We're also going to talk a little bit about kind of the differences between resumes and CVs. Some of you may be asked to be developing CVs. We'll talk about how there are subtle differences between the two and how you might navigate through that. My name is Matt Vaartstra. I am a career advisor here at National University. Been with National for over 3 years now in our career services office, but I've been working in career services for over a decade in different higher education institutions, both working on the student side, helping students find opportunities and go through career development topics, but also I've worked with on the employer side, working with employers to connect them with students as well. And so I've seen kind of a couple different kind of perspectives and takes. And being in the field for a decade hopefully gives me some insight into the resume process, how resumes have changed over the last decade or so, and hopefully leads that to being able to share with you all about how to make a resume that's going to be impactful in your job search and your internship search, whatever you're using your resume for. We want to make sure that you've got the best possible opportunity to land that interview. And I think that's the critical thing to remember, right? The interview is the goal. The resume is your foot in the door to be able to talk with someone, to be able to express and actually have a conversation back and forth about what it is that you are excited about their company, what it is that you bring to the table. So your resume becomes your foot in the door document for doing that. As Emily mentioned, please feel free to put questions in the Q&A box or the chat box. Either one works, and then we'll stop for questions a couple times throughout, or if I pick it up as we're going, happy to answer questions as we go too. So let's start off by talking about the purpose of a resume. And I cued into this a little bit there at the very beginning, but the bottom line for a resume is we want the resume to get you to the interview stage, right? And really that's what the application material is all about, whether that's the resume, the cover letter, any sort of application material you're filling out in an online form or anything like that, anything you're sending into an employer to try to get a job or internship would be considered part of that application packet. The job of that application packet is to get you an interview, right? And the interview is where you're then going to make an impression and create that sense of connection. The resume specifically is much more geared towards what I call being a checkbox document. And so what I mean by that is when you're applying to a job or when you're applying to an internship, you have an internship or a job description that's kind of sitting in front of you that you're applying to. That job description kind of becomes your guidebook for what do I need to be including, what do I need to be talking about in my application material. And specifically on your resume, what are the check boxes that I need to help the reader of my resume make on my document, right? So you're looking at a job description and you're seeing the qualifications that they're looking for, the skills that they're looking for, the abilities and responsibilities of the job. And throughout that, the qualifications are the easiest things to make those check boxes on, right? What are the minimum qualifications? Let's make sure on the resume that they're easy to find. We want those to be quick. We want them to be easy. We want them to be very clear that you meet those qualifications at a very quick glance. The other things are a little bit more nuanced. We'll talk about how we kind of dive into some of those when we jump into those sections of the resume. But as we start to read through a job description, we'll see things like keywords, key items, key skill abilities, and all of those things that kind of come through in a job description. I like highlight those things, pull them out, because we want to make sure we're reflecting those back to the reader in the resume that we're creating for them. So starting with a great baseline resume is a great starting point, but for each job you apply to, you're going to want to customize and tailor those to make the best possible impression. The reason we do this is twofold. Number one, the first kind of pass of your resume nowadays typically is through an applicant tracking system. And so you're getting kind of sorted and ranked by a computer. That computer is only as smart as the job description that it's provided. And so if you do a really good job of matching your resume and tweaking and tailoring and customizing your resume to that particular job description, you're going to get through the applicant tracking system process in a much more effective way. The next phase of kind of resume reviews, and this is generically speaking, it's not the same everywhere, but the next kind of phase you need to get through is someone from HR, probably in the talent acquisition team, is going to take a look at your resume. And so they're also not in your field, most likely, unless you're applying for an HR job. But so they don't know computer science or education or whatever the job is that you're applying to. What they do know, again, is the job description. And so they're looking for, do you meet all of the qualifications and keys in the job description? In that way, we want to make sure that we're still customized very specifically to that job description to pass through that phase of the review process. And then after that, we get into the hands of a hiring manager who actually works in your field. And that's going to be much more effective for you when you start to talk about your actual kind of the word, the verbiage, the keywords, those really important phrases that are used in your field. Now those are much more recognizable to the person that it's in the hands of, right? So it's almost like a three-tiered pass. Like, did we make it past the ATS? Did we make it past the screen from the HR representative? And then how are we doing when we get into the hands of an actual hiring manager that works in the field? So that's one way to kind of conceptualize what your resume is going to go through, what your application will go through as you try to get into that interview stage, right? The resume is a summary, not everything that you have done. It's a summary of the most important and most relevant things you've done to that particular job description. It's a first impression, and you want that first impression from a design standpoint to be very quick, right? As I'm scanning your resume, I need to very quickly be able to pick out at least those minimum qualifications, because that will make me want to read the rest of your resume more in depth. So how you design your resume becomes important, because it will help the reader find things more quickly, which will then keep me on the page longer, which will then get me more information about you, right? And that's the whole goal. The resume also can be used to feed into your online profiles. So your LinkedIn, your Handshake profile, if you're using either of those platforms, you want to be able to have your resume kind of reflected on those online platforms. And so a lot of stuff that happens, if you've got a really great baseline resume, a lot of that translates directly out into a LinkedIn profile or something like that. So you also have an online presence attached to your resume as well. And again, we want to be able to land an interview with the resume. Statistics tell us that this is actually an old statistic, so I have no idea what it is now. But about 5 years ago, the statistic was you had less than 10 seconds to make an initial impression with your resume. So when I talk about the design of the resume and how quickly somebody can find that information, that is the level of time that people will spend initially glancing at your resume. We want those big important things to stand out. We use the design and the structure and the hierarchy of the resume to do those things, and we'll see some of that come out as we jump into kind of each thing section by section today. There's a lot of words on this slide. I'll run through what I think are some of the most important things. In today's day and age, I still suggest, and most people in the field will still suggest, start from scratch with your resume. Start in a Word document. I do usually lean towards like start in Word. Word can be frustrating to work in, especially if you're not used to Word or if you're used to a different program. Starting in Word with a blank Word document, not a template, will allow you to customize things in a way that you won't be able to with other programs potentially. Other word processing documents can be perfectly fine to work in. I shy away from things like Canva, which has become very popular to create resumes in. There's a couple of problems that I have with Canva. Number one, it can be a little more tricky to work in. Other people can't help you out with it so much, right? If you send it into us, we can't open it up in Canva, and because we just don't use Canva, and so we can't like help with edits and things like that as well as we can if we get it in a Word format, right? We can make comments on it and send it back to you for changes, but it's easier if you need some help with spacing or moving things around. Like we can help easier with that if it's in a Word document. Moreover, unless you're really good at Canva, which you might be, and you might be able to make something really great, the nuances of Canva are such that you might not get the spacing quite right, or it's a little more tricky to get that. Whereas in Word, it's just a simple, you press the return key or you shift enter or whatever, and you can get it the way you want it. The bigger problem that we found with resumes that are created in Canva is even when you export them out to PDFs, the applicant tracking systems have issues sorting through that information in a clear way. And so what you'll end up having to do is when you put it into, for example, an applicant tracking system that then parses it out into different sections, you'll be doing a lot of correction work to get the information where it's supposed to go. And if you don't get the opportunity to do that correcting, if you just send it in and it gets put in an applicant tracking system on the back end, it will look messy to them as well on the back end. So the applicant tracking systems aren't able to parse through and find the information they're looking for as well in something that's created in Canva, as opposed to when you keep it pretty simple and keep it in Word. It's really interesting because you start to think about the advent of AI and all of this technology that's available to us, and it's actually made us kind of in a way dumb down our resumes, which is really interesting, right? And so when we'll talk about AI here in a little bit, but the idea of applicant tracking systems and the advent of them being used almost exclusively by most companies nowadays is we've taken resumes and we've actually had to adjust the format and structure of those resumes so that they function better with applicant tracking systems. And there's actually been this kind of push and pull that goes on where to design something that works well for an applicant tracking system, it doesn't actually look as good to a human reader. And so we're having to kind of fuss with this balance between, okay, well, we still want it to look good to the human reader because at the end of the day, that's where we end up. But we also need to make sure we're passing through the applicant tracking system in the best way possible, right? So I will tend to say like avoid Canva, stick with Word. It's easier that way for the applicant tracking systems. Even if you PDF it, it just still works better to be in a Word kind of format. Use reverse chronological order. That's in every section. So within section, always stay reverse chronological. We talked a little bit about this already, but target your qualifications to the job. The way you describe your experiences, the way that you write your action verb statements, we'll talk about those in a little bit, those should be written to those job descriptions, right? It's important to have those pieces be customized and tailored when you come to that space. We'll talk about kind of using past and present tense only, and then make sure you're using keywords from your industry to describe your skills and accomplishments. When it gets to that final stage, right, when it's in the hands of someone who works in your field, you want them to know that you know what you're talking about, right? That you're familiar with the terms in the field. Dr. Spranger, we have a question.
Yes, we do. And it has to do with the keywords. So just curious if you have any insight or thoughts on this, and it's in the chat, just in case you did want to follow along. But for keywords, I have heard to help get more hits from the AI reader is to add keywords in the bottom of the as a footnote in white text so the system can see the words, but the HR person cannot. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the idea behind this is sound. The execution of it is often not, because what happens is when the AI well, not AI, typically it's actually not AI at this point, just when the applicant tracking system goes to parse that out, it's parsing it out. And the person on the other end is going to see that you've done that, regardless of whether you think they're going to see it or not. Like, because the applicant tracking system takes everything from your resume and puts it into different fields and sorts it for the people on the other end, for the HR representative, right? So all of a sudden there's going to be this whole slew of keywords that have no context and are kind of just free flowing at the bottom. The applicant tracking system doesn't know what to do with those words, where to put them within the system of because it's really more of an information sorting system than it is anything. And so those words will all of a sudden just be there. And so then the person on the other side, eventually when the HR person gets it, they're looking, yeah, at your resume that you sent them, but they're also looking at what's in their applicant tracking system, right? And then stuff looks a little bit funky, right? So, but the idea behind this is you want to have the keywords from the job description in your resume. So rather than putting them in white text at the bottom, just build them into your resume. Use them as your action verb statements, build them into your experiences, write them as part of your summary so that you're getting the same effect, but it's actually there for the reader to see as well on the other side, right? The more the merrier is kind of a like yes and no, right? You want all of your stuff to have context. If you have a skill word that has no context, when it gets to the person on the other side, they're going to be saying, well, you wrote this lovely word. It's a great skill, but I'm not seeing where you got that skill. They're always looking for that connection point, right? That context for the skill that you have to be able to get that full picture of what you actually bring to the table. Otherwise, I'm sitting there as the reader asking questions about, okay, this skill sounds good, but I don't know where you got that skill. It's something we want, but I don't know where you have it from, right? So context matters in the case of the resume, especially when you get into that kind of second and third level review process.
Thank you so much. And just one more, I guess, your take on the photo. Um, why no photos? Apparently, there was some advice given to this other individual that maybe it is preferred. And do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so no photos on resumes. No photos on resumes, no photos on CVs. There are several reasons for this. Number one, it creates inherent bias, right? There's inherent bias in being able to see a person. And so we don't want to provide them with the opportunity to have bias. The EEOC laws actually restrict that kind of stuff anyway. We don't want to put companies in a predicament where they are having to throw out resumes just because there are pictures on it, because they're trying to operate within the context of not having those biases present. So we'd rather not provide them with the opportunity to have those types of biases from the get-go. And so that's one of the reasons why we won't do that. The other reason is honestly space. We only have 1 to 2 pages to make an impression with our resume, and so we don't have room to have a picture on there. If they want to see your picture, they can go to your LinkedIn profile if that's something that they want to do. But we're not going to provide that information to them on the off chance that A, they don't want it because it could impact bias and they want to be operating under Equal Opportunity Employment Hiring Act stuff. And so they probably on the initial end, they don't want to see any of that. The hiring manager on the back end, if they need that kind of stuff, they'll go to your LinkedIn profile. So on your LinkedIn profile, absolutely have your picture on there. On your resume, we're not going to include that kind of information. Yeah.
Thank you. There was one
Okay.
other thing about the LinkedIn profile to include on the resume, but I'll wait and see if you cover it.
Yeah, we'll jump into that here in just a second.
Okay.
Couple other don'ts, and then we'll jump into some of these details because your questions are leading into kind of the next slides. So we'll address some of those as we go, hopefully. And if we don't, please bring them back up so that we make sure we get those taken care of. I already mentioned don't use templates. Shy away from abbreviations, at least the first time, right? Write them out the first time, put it in parentheses, and then you can use that abbreviation later on. We go away from pronouns in the resume, so we don't use I, me, my kind of statements. We're sticking with action verb oriented statements, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. We're not listing references or hobbies, no photos or personal information. And then the big thing here is don't exaggerate or falsify information. And I guess I'll take this moment just to make sure I talk about it, to talk about AI. The advent of AI and using AI in the creation of resumes is something that we want to utilize as a tool, but we don't want to lean on it as our go-to for resume creation and resume writing. Number one, at least from my experiences, the resumes that are being generated strictly from AI, the format is not that great. We want to be able to tweak that anyway. And then the biggest problem that people are finding and that I have with people using AI to generate resume content is that you didn't write the action verb statements. You didn't write those skills that you have. And so then when somebody in an interview asks you, hey, I see this line on your resume that talks about this skill. Tell me more about that. There's a deer in the headlights look because you're like, oh, like the AI wrote that, like I have that skill, but the AI wrote that for me and I haven't reflected on it. I haven't thought about it. So you can use AI to start to help generate ideas and even work on phrasing and different things like that. Hey, this is what I want to say. How could I say this in a different way to emphasize this particular skill, right? Boom, it'll provide you with options so you can utilize AI to help you generate ideas for how things are phrased, but you want those particular phrases to reflect your skills and abilities, and you want to be able to tell stories to those skills and abilities. If you don't have a story that goes along with each and every action verb that you have on your resume, you're going to have a problem when you get into the interview phase because you can't actually talk to the things that are on your resume. And the main issue with AI is that it just writes stuff that it thinks you may have done at a particular experience, right? And so, whether you did that or not, the AI has no idea, right? And the other big thing that the AI will miss out on is any sort of results-oriented piece of the puzzle. When we get into action verb statements, we'll talk about how results are really important in those action verb statements to be able to really, really make the best of your action verb statement. We want to be able to have some sort of results or outcome-oriented piece. AI can't write that because they have no idea what the actual result of what you did was, right? They would literally just be making stuff up. And so, again, we can utilize AI, but we don't want to lean too heavily on it because we want to be able to tell stories around what we're doing. Okay, I'm going to go quickly through some of this stuff. Hopefully, we'll answer a few of your questions. We want to use white space efficiently, and we'll see a couple ways to do this when we get into the example that we're going to cover in the second half. We want to use easy to read and consistent format. We want things to be in the same place at the same area, telling us the same information in every different section. So you'll notice that when we get into the example, the degree and then the university and then the city, state, and then the dates are all in the same place as when we get to the experience section, the title, the company, the city, state, and the dates. We want them to be in the same place. That's easy for the reader to find that information as they go from section to section. Margins should be from 0.5 to 1 inch. I will strongly encourage leaning towards the 0.5. There's a little bit of personal preference in that, but the biggest thing with that is we want more space on the page to be able to put information, right? We want to be very careful about how we're using space, but we want as much space as possible because we do have only 1 to 2 pages to make an impression with a resume. Resume should never go over 2 pages. If your resume is over 2 pages, start cutting and slashing. And we can help with that in career services, and it also helps to be able to customize it to the job description, right? What is relevant to this job description? Cut out the stuff that's not, right? You do have 2 pages as an option. Some of you will want to stick with 1 page, and some employers still are stuck on the 1-page resume idea. It's much, much more acceptable to be on 2 pages nowadays than it is otherwise, particularly if you have years of experience behind you, and particularly if you have an advanced degree. If you have either of those 2 things, and definitely if you have both of them, 2 pages is perfectly fine. So don't be too concerned with like, oh, I have to get it all on 1 page. The general line of thinking is about a decade ago, that was true. We pretty much were like forcing people onto 1 page, and employers started to find out, well, we're not actually making the best hiring decisions because we're not getting all the information on that 1 page. There are people that have 2 pages worth of really great stuff to tell us. And so they started to open up a little more and become more accepting of 2-page resumes. So don't be afraid if you need 2 pages, but make sure that everything on there is really relevant to the reader, really relevant to the job description. Don't just do 2 pages because you have 2 possible pages. We want to make sure that everything is very customized and very relevant to the reader. Couple of font suggestions there. Sans serif fonts are what you want to use in the body. Serif-based fonts, the ones with the little feet at the top and the bottoms and the sides, those ones we really want to limit to only being kind of in headings. They're just a little more, usually they're a little less pleasing on the eye. They're a little difficult to read, like more so anyway than your sans serif font. So sans serifs in the body, headings can be in the serif font still. Font size between 10 and 12. You'll notice I actually put the examples in there very specifically because if you see Garamond as a font, is a very small font. So if you use size 10 Garamond, no, too small, okay? Go bigger with Garamond. But you'll notice like Verdana or Cambria, very big fonts. They're bigger size fonts. And so we can go closer to the 10, right? So know that different fonts have different sizes to them inherently. And so if you're using a small font and then you use a small font size, you're going to get too small. If you're using a big font and you use a big font size, you're probably going to get too big and you're going to be wasting space with that. So just be aware of what font size you choose to use. Make sure you proofread, get feedback on your resume. That's what we're here for in career services. You can send your resume to us. You can schedule an appointment. We'll go over that at the very end to be able to talk one-on-one specifically about your resume and the jobs and internships you might be applying for. The biggest thing with the format, though, is show the reader what you want them to see. Each line of the resume, you should ask yourself the question, what is the most important piece of information to the reader? And is that what they're signing first? Is that what the formatting is on? If you're bolding something like the company over your title or the university over your degree. You're creating a sense of lack of importance for your part of it, right? Your title, your degree. Where you got those is secondary information. So I don't want to draw the reader to that. I want to draw the reader to the thing that tells me the most about me. We want to tell them that thing, right? So use your bolding, use formatting to be able to draw the reader down the page to the things that you want them to see and where you want them to stop. Remember, if you have that 10 seconds to make an impression, what are the things that you want to make an impression with to keep them reading, to keep them drawn in? Don't use fancy fonts, borders, or layouts. We've gotten a lot more flexibility on this now, especially if you're in a design-oriented or a creative field. You can be a little bit more, you can use this stuff a little bit more. Color is definitely more acceptable on resumes than it has been in the past. So little splashes of color here, maybe in the header or in the headings or in lines that you're making across the page, you can throw some color in. Stick with pastel, like earthy tone colors. We don't want anything bright or anything like that. So we don't want the color to be distracting, but you can add a touch of personality to a resume now that, probably a decade ago was pretty frowned upon. This is definitely industry specific. If you're working in accounting, black and white. If you're working in finance or business, trend on the side of being more on the black and white side of things and more conservative on the side of color. If you're working in a creative field or a design field, or something where, education even, where there's a little bit more flexibility in that, you can be a little bit more kind of flexible on color and different things like that. We typically won't use headers and footers because it actually, especially if you're working in Word, headers and footers just get kind of funky. If you're putting your name at the top of the second page, that might be a space where you could use a header. We typically won't use footers at all. And your initial heading, I typically will not put inside of a header. So I don't use the headers. That function in Word, I don't use that very much just because there's extra spacing that happens up there and it gets kind of funky. So I'd rather just not touch those and just utilize my own thing and not have to mess with Word's stuff in there. We already talked about not going past that 2-page length as well. Here are the key sections for a resume. And I've got some standard headings and I've got some other headings. And the standard headings are kind of important nowadays. And this is where, again, applicant tracking systems come in. You can make it easier for the applicant tracking system to be able to parse out your information if you just use standard headings and don't throw extra words or try to be fancy with what you're trying to say. So your standard sections that you're going to have in your resume, a summary section, very popular now, wasn't popular, again, probably even 5 years ago, but a summary section is very popular now. We'll go over it. Skills or areas of expertise, education, experience, technology and computer skills, and then community service or volunteerism. And that last section is kind of an optional section. You don't have to have it. But the other ones are pretty standard. Summary, skills, education, experience, and then a technology or computer skills section. And if you title them as such, it will be very easy for the applicant tracking system to pull that information out, right? So if you're making a resume, those are pretty much the headings that you'll want to use. Now, there are other things that you might want to throw in there. You might change your summary section to a summary of qualifications or a profile. A summary is just simpler and easier for the applicant tracking system to pull out, so you can just use that. The skills section can sometimes be called the areas of expertise or competencies. Totally fine either way. It's just how you want to describe that. Some people will put a descriptor for their experience, like professional experience or relevant experience. I'm still completely fine with that. Usually that's going to get parsed appropriately by the ATS. So if you're looking to describe your experiences a little bit more, you can do that as well. If you're talking specifically to your teaching experience or to a practicum experience that you had, you could use that in your header. And then there's if you're separating your experiences between like related experience and additional experience, you can do that as well. One of the reasons why you might want to do that is if you have, right, everything is reverse chronological. So if you have an experience section and maybe the most recent experience you had is maybe not the most relevant one to the job you're applying for, this happens. You could do a related or relevant experience section and then an additional experience section and separate those out, right? So that most recent experience maybe can get pulled into the additional experience section so that an older experience maybe can be up at the top of your related experience section. This helps with the order of things on the resume. The higher up on the resume, the more importance I ascribe to it as a reader. So if you need to bring information up to the top, but reverse chronological is not letting you do that, we're going to stick with reverse chronological, most recent working backwards within section, but we can format our sections or break our sections up to help get the right information up to the top. Hopefully that makes sense. Oftentimes we'll see a certification section based on industries. And then if you speak other languages, very, very relevant to have on the resume. I usually will put it as its own section. It doesn't have to go there. It could technically go into the skills or the areas of expertise section as well. But if you speak other languages, that is definitely something worth highlighting, particularly for certain companies and industries nowadays. Okay, before we jump into kind of a breakdown and an example of a resume, we walk through each of the sections. Let's talk about CVs a little bit. Some of you will be asked for CVs, not all of you. CVs are pretty specific, particularly in the US or in North America. CVs are used almost exclusively for academic related jobs and research related jobs. Sometimes higher level positions will ask for a CV just to give you more flexibility, to give them more information. The primary difference in my mind with a CV is that there's no page limit. Really, when it boils down to it, that's the primary difference between a resume and a CV. If you're asked for a CV, you're no longer beholden to that 2-page limit. And the real change then that happens is you usually break up your information in a larger way and you just put more information into a CV than you would a resume. So a CV, because academics is what really lends towards CVs, you'll find a teaching experience section, a research experience section, a relevant experience section, just like you would on a resume, but you've also got the research and the teaching experience pulled out into their own sections. You might see publications, presentations, conferences you've attended, associations and professional memberships. And those associations and professional memberships can also be added to resumes, by the way. If there are relevant associations and professional memberships you're a part of in your field, that could be great, a great little section at the end of your resume as well. If you've worked on any grants or received any grants, definitely have those on your CV, especially if you're applying within higher education or to an academic or research type of position. And then honors and awards can be something that you'll see more frequently in a CV as well. So really, when you think about it, the CV is just an expanded look at your work history and your academic experience than the resume is. You're not beholden to that limit, and you're adding more sections typically. So in addition to your standard sections on the resume, we're adding in these extra pieces of information on the CV. Usually the summary you won't see on a CV. That's been more kind of a thing that's on resumes. And so the summary will oftentimes disappear from a CV and be replaced by all of the additional kind of sections that you might see on a CV. Hopefully that provides kind of a good kind of differential between your resume and your CV. Formatting wise, I really don't change almost anything. The same principles apply to a CV that apply to a resume, from a structure, from a format, from a hierarchy perspective, from an action verb standpoint. All of the tips that I'm going to give on a resume, it's going to be exactly the same on a CV. It's just now we've got a lot more space to work with, and we're going to try to really break stuff up into a lot more sections within a CV. Before we jump into the breakdown, do we have any questions I can address? The rest of the presentation, we're going to walk through the sections of a resume, of a standard resume, and kind of see what each of those look like and give kind of tips and tricks for each section.
For right now, we went ahead and took care of a lot of the questions that popped up in the chat a little bit earlier. I think we're okay at this point, Dr. Vaartstra, to move
Awesome.
forward, and then if anything else pops, we can address it at the end.
Okay, sounds good. So let's walk through a resume sample together, and at the end, you'll kind of see it all kind of put together. But I want to walk through each section just to give you kind of tips and tricks on each of those and what those might look like. First things first, the header, the top of the resume, where you put your contact information. This is where you kind of, again, first impression wise, this is pretty important, right? We want to make a good first impression with the header. We want the right information to be in the right place. And moreover, I want to remember your name. And therein lies kind of my first thing. Biggest, boldest text on the page, your name, right? Make your name the biggest and boldest text on the page. It doesn't need to like explode off the page, right? But it should be clearly the biggest and clearly, well, I guess boldest is a weird term because it won't be bolder than anything else, but make it bold and make it the biggest thing on the page, right? That will help me remember your name. If anything else, I want to remember who you are, remember your name from that resume, right? I want you to stand out. So name, biggest and boldest, and then we put all the relevant contact information: phone, email, city, state, zip code is often included, and LinkedIn URL as well. The LinkedIn URL is something that's really nice because it allows them to cross-reference your resume with your online profile and see any of those added things, because LinkedIn, fun story, is not beholden to the two-page rule that a resume is held to. So LinkedIn is a place where I will add more information, more action verb statements, more skill statements on LinkedIn than I will on a resume. Because on LinkedIn, I have to click on the little see more button. It's only going to show me the first two lines under each different entry within LinkedIn. I have to click see more to see anything else. But if I want to see more and I've already clicked on that button, then guess what? I'm not, you're the one who clicked the see more button. Okay. So now I'm giving you all everything, right? And the more you have in LinkedIn, the more searchable you become as well. So the LinkedIn becomes kind of a space where like your master resume kind of might live with everything in it that people might be interested in searching for. We would tweak and tailor that LinkedIn based on maybe your job search and make sure the right things are moved up to the top of those sections so that I don't have to click the see more button to see the most important things within your LinkedIn, but you can have more on there. I like to link to the LinkedIn because of other things too. It gives you, people can endorse your skills on LinkedIn. So it's not just you saying you have skills. There's now a cross reference to other people you maybe have worked with saying, hey, I've seen these skills in action. You can also get recommendations and things like that on LinkedIn as well. So there's a nice cross check there. So we'll typically find the LinkedIn profile there in the header as well. Don't forget you can customize your LinkedIn URL. If you didn't know you could do that, everyone's LinkedIn URL will jump in like with a bunch of numbers at the end. So it'll be your name and then like this slew of numbers. You can get rid of those numbers and customize your URL. Depending on how common your name is, you might have to put some descriptor or something else in there. But for the most part, you can just go with like first and last name and just keep it more simple and clean. That way it looks good on the resume as well. Question about cover letters. I highly endorse cover letters. I'm not going to talk about cover letters from a content perspective today, but I'm more than happy to talk about that in a career services appointment. Any of our advisors would be happy to cover that. I strongly endorse, if you have the option to do a cover letter, do a cover letter. I'll give you, because the question was asked, I'll give you my one thing on cover letters. It's going to go longer than I want it to, but that's okay. The resume is a checkbox document, right? We're checking boxes, we're showing that we can do the job. The cover letter then needs to do something different. It needs to be additive to the process. We don't want to just replicate the resume and the cover letter in written form. That doesn't do anything for me. In my opinion, and this is an opinion, my assumption is that the resume gets read first. If I like your resume, I'll read your cover letter. Your cover letter's got to capture me pretty quickly to keep me involved. It needs to be short. It needs to be probably 3/4 of a page max. And it needs to create a connection between me and you. The resume is focused on, in my opinion, the job description, the position itself. The cover letter can be focused on, yeah, a little bit of that, a little bit of the stuff from the job description, maybe the key things, but I want to show a connection between you and the company, right? Because that job you're applying to is probably available at a lot of different potential companies, schools, whatever it is you're applying to. My cover letter's job is to convince the reader that it is not just a job that I want, it is a job with this company specifically. So with cover letters, I do this. Here's them, and here's you. And by the end of the cover letter, this is what I want to have happened, right? That requires you to write about them, write about their company in the cover letter, and then create how you fit with them. Talk about them, talk about how you fit with them. There's my cover letter in a nutshell advice. Okay. In the header, we put information in a particular order because we want to emphasize, again, what information comes first is the most important information to the reader. They're going to use your phone number and your email and your LinkedIn more than they're going to use your city, state, and zip code, right? Zip code we throw in there for searchability purposes. So if you're putting, your resume out there from a searchability standpoint on like a website that like collects resumes, like an Indeed or something like that, or even Handshake, the zip code can be a searchable field. So we kind of put that in there for that purpose. City state really is the only pertinent information that I need on like a standard resume. Don't put full address on your resume anymore. It's just not useful. No one is using that information, and you really don't want your full address sitting out there if you're putting it online or emailing it or anything like that anyway. So city state zip is perfectly fine for that information. And you'll notice in this particular example that the city state zip is on the far side. This is tertiary information at best. So we're telling the reader that it's unimportant by where we put it, right? We read top to bottom, left to right. So we're going to put any information that is not important, we're going to put lower, and we're going to put off to the right side, right? And so that's what we're doing with the city state in this particular case. We're giving the reader the most important information first. Very common in a header now is kind of the first thing you see on a resume is a role or position sought line. I find this quite funny actually, because a decade plus ago when I started in career services, objective statements were all the rage. We had the first section in a resume was an objective statement, and it was tailored to the particular company. And then we were like, oh, why are we doing these? It's just stating the obvious. We're applying to a job, and we're saying in the first line of the resume that we're applying to that job, basically. And so we got rid of them with good reason, I think. And now they're kind of making, in my opinion, kind of making a comeback now all of a sudden, because now what we're doing is we're putting kind of the role or position that we're going for is that is like almost like a pseudo title. Right underneath our header. It's become very common, very popular in resume writing now, so that's something that you can do. That then maybe gets customized a little bit based off of the types of jobs or the title that you're applying to at a particular company, but that's something that we've seen pop back up in resume writing now. The next section that we're going to see is going to be that summary section. And this section is a little bit of a kind of like an artistic science. You get to write your summary statement. You want it to be 3 or 4 statements, no more than 3 or 4 lines. If you hit the 5th line, if you're going to 5 lines on your summary, you better have really good things to say, and you better have a lot of experience to back it up. If you don't have a lot of experience in the field yet, cut the summary section down to that 3 to 4 lines. I like the opening line to have something number related in it. This particular example doesn't have this in it, but something to the effect of um, some blah, 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 skilled professional, or put your field in with X number of years of experience in, and then write what your years of experience are in, right? And maybe that experience isn't even directly in the field. Maybe it's in something transferable, like customer service or client relationships or something like that. You can still talk to those years of experience. And what I like about that is right off the bat, at the very top of your resume, you're checking a box. More often than not, on most job descriptions, there's going to be a section that says we're looking for someone with X number of years of experience. Regardless of whether they're looking for someone entry level and they're looking for 1 year of experience or whatever, they're probably going to have a line in there like that. A lot of job descriptions do. This way, at the very top of your resume, if you have those years of experience in a particular area that you want to speak to, in the very first line of your summary, which is the first thing I'm going to read, there's a number. Numbers draw my eye as a reader, and you've actually done the math for them. I could go down to your experience section, and I'm going to calculate out your years of experience, right? But if you tell me what that is and do the math for me, I can make a quick checkbox. It might be a checkbox that I'm going to go double check later on, but it's still a quick checkbox that I can make on your resume. So I like opening with something like that. The biggest thing I think for the summary section is that it's a great space to start to tailor your resume. The skill statements that you choose to write down here in this example, develops and fosters professional relationships, works collaboratively on team projects, right? That's a nice statement, but that could be different maybe for a different job description. Maybe maybe the next job you apply to is focused on something a little bit different. Adjust your summary section a little bit. There's a lot of things you could say in a summary section about your kind of key top skills and abilities. So make sure you customize that summary section to the jobs that you're applying to, right? Another important key for me with the summary section is if it's in the summary section or if it's in the next section, which is the skills or competencies section, make sure that you support the things you say in those sections later on in the resume. Like we talked about earlier, context matters in a resume. And if you just sit here in a summary section and tell me all kinds of great things, I'm like, ooh, that's very impressive. Okay, develops and fosters professional relationships. My question becomes, where have you developed and fostered professional relationships? Was that something you have successfully done? Where did you successfully do that? Similarly, in the skills section, if you say something like research and data analysis, I'm like, cool, awesome. That sounds great. Something I need, I want that. However, where did you get that, right? So the summary section and the skills or competency section becomes kind of like a preview, like a quick hit at the beginning. Here's some checkboxes you can make that have little question marks next to them because I want to see the context for those later. It's almost like a little marketing tool, the summary section and the skills section. And then later on in the action verb statements within the context of your experience, we're going to prove those skills and where we got them to the reader. The next section is the skills or competencies section. We'll see it called areas of expertise as well. You can kind of play around with that. The most basic kind of format of that is just the skills section. You'll notice I put a big X through this first one, and this is again due to the advent of applicant tracking systems. Columns are very frowned upon by applicant tracking systems. They do not know what to do with information in columns. It's unfortunate because the first section, I love how it looks. We used to do resumes like this all the time. We would break it up into 3 columns. It filled up the white space really nicely. It was really easy to read. It's great for a human reader. But apparently it confuses the applicant tracking system. So we've gone away from columns on resumes, and that's from an overall design perspective and from a within section design perspective. So if you have a multi-column resume that has a bar on the side with information and then your main content is on the side, we're going to go away from that and we're going to go with a single column. Again, applicant tracking systems do not like columns. And general resume writing strategies right now are suggesting we move away from anything columnar and into just a single page document. So if you've got a double column document, it probably looks good, but we're going to move away from that and make sure that we go to what's standard in the industry now and just go with a single column, one page kind of format. The way that we're now writing stuff in the skills section is much more in line with what's down there in the second piece there. We're using vertical lines. You can use bullets to separate each one. You can use hyphens, whatever like works for you. I typically will advise away from commas. Like commas just don't create quite that nice like separation. It's much more difficult to kind of flow through that section and like pick out the most important things. And again, don't forget, order of importance matters here, right? What you put in the top left is the most important stuff. What you put across the top row is the most important stuff. What you put on the first column is the most important stuff. Like in this example, right? Campaign strategy and relationship building are kind of just buried in the middle there, right? I'm probably not seeing those on an initial glance. So where you choose to put your skills might be tailored and customized based off of that job description. What are the most important things to that job description? Let's make sure those are in the first row, in the first column, so that they see them readily and can check those boxes off when possible. Typically, we're going to see the education section next. If you're working on a degree, usually your education section will come next, particularly if you're changing fields and making an adjustment into a new area. Education section will come first because we want to point the reader in the right direction. If we jump right into your experiences may not be as relevant as your education is. And so education will typically come next. Now, as you get jobs in the field and as you become more and more kind of just embedded in the field that you're going into, the education section will drop down lower on the resume. But for now, typically we'd be seeing the education section next. You also see certifications blended in here as well, whether it's as its own section or together with the education, either of those work. We want to start with the degree. We're going to go in reverse chronological order. We're going to put the emphasis on the degree. Then we're going to put the other information, right? Your institution, the location, graduation date. And we just do graduation date in this section. So we don't do inclusive dates, month year to month year. We use those in the experience section, but for the education section, we're just putting the graduation date. Certifications, licenses, we're going to format basically in the same way. So if we look at the examples here, we can see under the education section, we've bolded the degree, write out your degree. BA and BS look funny on paper, so just write them out. We want to brag about those degrees. Use the words to describe your full degree. Then we've got kind of secondary information, right? And dates are off to the side. I like dates off to the side. Personal preference, I think dates are secondary or tertiary even information. I'm going to put them off to that side of the page. If you want to find them, you can find them. If not, I prefer you stayed on the other side of the page, right? That's what I want to do, is keep your eye where I want you to go. Let the dates go off to the side. And in fact, in this particular example, they're bolded. I probably even unbold them. Like if you need them, they're there. You can see them, and then stick with the main kind of section. Stick on the main area. Certifications, again, kind of same idea, right? You can add some bullet points underneath your education. So things like GPA, any sort of like merit-based or academic-based awards could potentially go here if you're part of an honor society that you want to talk about. So there are potential bullet points that you could put underneath that as well. Not necessary, but something that you could have if you wanted to. All right, the experience section to me kind of becomes what I would call the meat and potatoes of the resume for the most part. And this is typically going to come after your education, although again, those can flip depending on kind of relevance level, right? We want to start with your job title. Then we're going to provide them with kind of the standard information, company name, city, state, and dates, inclusive dates, month, year to month, year. We want those to be formatted usually very similarly. As long as they're the same across the board, then you're probably fine. Although the month, year, like that's typically how they're going to be formatted. You can do like June of the year to like you can use that as well. Just make sure you keep it consistent. Sometimes people will give like a brief description of the company. I've kind of gone away from that a little bit. If that description of the company gives good information about what you did there, then you can make an argument for keeping that. But a lot of the times you'll see this get left out. It is something that we'll see every once in a while still on a resume is a brief little statement about what the company actually is or does. But the problem for me is I don't want to know what the company did. I don't care what the company did. What I care is about what you did, right? If the company maybe is completely unknown and I have no idea what that might have gotten for you, maybe the description becomes useful because it tells me something about what you did there. But if it doesn't relate back to you in some way, shape, or form, I'm just going to cross that section out. We'll just go straight into the action verb statements. Okay. The action verb statements for me are the biggest and most important part of the resume. These highlight your relevant skills, abilities, and accomplishments. These are particularly tailored to the job description. What I mean by that is if the job description says, hey, we're looking for someone who can design such and such a thing. Awesome. I've designed stuff. I'm going to make sure I have an action verb statement that starts with designed on my resume. Perfect. The next place you apply to might say in their job description, hey, we're looking for someone who can create such and such a thing. Like, okay, well, design and create are the same word. For resume number 1, it's going to be design. And for resume number 2, I'm just going to sub the word out and I'm going to use create because that's what they're using, right? So we want to reflect their job description and even the language within the job description back to them within our action verb statements to the best of our ability. So go through those job descriptions, highlight the key words, highlight the key skills and qualifications they're looking for, and to the best of your ability, reflect those back to them through your action verb statements. Now, sometimes action verb statements are just directly what you did at the job because the job that you did is relevant to the position you're applying for. Sometimes the jobs that you have held are not necessarily directly relevant to the position that you're applying to now. So don't tell me about stuff you did at a job unless it's relevant to the job that you're applying to. My baseline example for this is the most simple example I can come up with. If you're applying to be an accountant, but in order to put yourself through school, you were working in the fast food industry, and your most recent experience is in fast food. We're not going to leave that off. It's a valuable experience. It's your most recent experience. But instead of talking about things like cooked burgers, mopped floors, and cleaned tables, I don't need you to do any of that in my accounting firm. We're going to talk about transferable skills. We might write something to the effect of communicated daily with team members to ensure timely food delivery, right? Maybe we even know what the efficiency rating was to provide X number efficiency of timely food delivery, right? We can put numbers to it if we can, right? That tells me something that's valuable from that experience. Now you're talking to me about an experience where at face value, I'm like, oh, that's not really what we're looking for. But then you start talking to me about the skills from that are relevant to me, those transferable skills. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, we need someone who can communicate. We need someone who can work with a team, and we need someone with time management skills. And you've actually just given them that in one quick statement underneath an experience that, again, at face value wasn't very relevant. But you talk to me about that experience in a way that is relevant by focusing on transferable skills. Again, communication, teamwork, leadership, time management, problem solving, right? These are all transferable skills you can pick up from a lot of different places, but that are applicable to a lot of different places. Interestingly enough, employers will tell us that transferable skills are actually oftentimes more important to them than hard skills. They'll say, I can teach you how to do the job, but I can't teach you how to be a great team player, or I don't want to have to anyway, right? Like I want you to bring those skills with you into this job. So transferable skills are very important to talk about. How do you write these action verb statements? That last in bold at the very bottom, that final bullet on this slide, what did you do? How did you do it? And why, or to what purpose? So you pick an action verb, right? Communicated, designed, created, implemented, analyzed, right? Pick your key action verb and then answer 2 questions about it. Usually it's kind of the who or how and then the why. And that why at the end brings in that purpose, right? Some sort of result-oriented statement brings the best ending to an action verb statement. They don't all have to have that, but it's nice to have them. 2 things that I'll always tell people about these. Quantities are nice. If you can give numbers where possible. Teaching a classroom of 3 students is very different than teaching a classroom of 30 students. In a very quick number, you can provide me a lot of information. Those numbers also draw my eye, right? Don't write them out in Word, like letter format. Write like do the numerical number because my eye is drawn to that as a reader. Time frame words also help. Daily, monthly, weekly, right? In one word, I get a lot of value out of that from a description standpoint in your action verb statements. Here's my trick. You can use past and present tense or just use past tense. My main reason for this is I'm lazy and I just want to have past tense on everything so that when I have to update my resume, I never have to change the tense again. It's just all in past tense. So all past tense, the entire resume, even if the experience is to present and I'm currently doing it. My logic behind this is the reader is reading everything as if it's in the past anyway. If I get the job with them, everything I'm doing is in the past. So I can write it all in past tense, and that's perfectly fine to me. Other people have different opinions, but I like to just past tense the entire thing. Then I never have to think about verb tense. And when I go to update my resume later on, I don't have to change the verb tense on anything or worry about whether I did or didn't change the verb tense. I just past tense the whole thing. Okay, I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to move quickly through these last couple slides. There's just a few more. Here's an example of what that might look like. You can kind of see how now the bullets draw my eye, and then I'm reading those key skill words: promote, coordinate, oversee, proofread, research, provide, took, created, designed, right? So there's your key skill words, right? So if I were critiquing this, I'd probably come down to where it says took inventory. If the word took doesn't give me much. Be more descriptive than that, right? Give me a skill word there instead, right? In fact, the key in that particular statement is probably that you ensured prompt service delivery. So lead with that and then fill in the blanks, right? So be very critical of your action verb statements such that if I only read the first word next to the bullet point, do I get a list of the skills that you bring to the table for me? Okay. Technology and computer skills section. If you are in a technology heavy field, computer science, anything that is computer related, or the job is heavily computer related, or any of that sort of thing, software development, this section should probably come after your skills section or even replace the skills section sometimes. So for most people, this is going to take place kind of later on in the resume potentially, but if you are in a technology driven field, this is probably really big checkbox documents. Like these are check marks that need to be made. The computer languages you know, the softwares you know, the hardwares you know, those are going to come higher up in the resume. So just keep in mind, again, order of importance matters. And usually, again, you'll see it listed like this. I'll critique this particular example with the commas. I would just use those vertical lines or dots or hyphens or something to break them up a little bit more clearly so it's easier to read. If you're in a technology heavy field, you might even want to break these up into like softwares, hardwares, languages, or something like that. You could break it up further into different types of technology if that helps to make it so it's not just such a long list, right? So you can section this off a little bit if you need to. Community service or community involvement is a nice way to round out the bottom of the resume. This is just a way to show that you're more than just someone who went to school and had some experiences, right? If you've been volunteering in the community, this is a place where you can talk about maybe some transferable skills, things like that. Ooh, quick point. For action verb statements, 3 to 6 action verb statements per experience. 3 to 6 action verb statements per experience. In the communities, in the volunteerism section, 1 is fine. Like if you got great transferable skills from it, or if it's a leadership experience, you could probably offer more of those, but you certainly don't have to. But again, you'll notice that the layout almost exactly the same as the experience section there. If you don't have community service, it's not a huge deal. Some companies do key off of this though. If they're very community oriented out in their environment, trying to make an impact as a company, do your research because you might want to pick up some volunteer experiences just to be able to augment your resume with those. If the company you're applying to is very big about being out and invested in the community as a company, you probably want to show that you are that way as well. Here's what it looks like all put together. And this is a very basic formatted resume. You'll notice there's no color. It's very simplistic, but there's lines in there that help to break apart everything. We're using the bolds to kind of show me where you want to read. And you can see how it all kind of comes together in that way, from the heading to the profile or summary to the education, the experience, the community involvement, and the technology in this particular resume. Very clean, looks the same as far as each section goes, and I always know where to find the information. That will do it for my content for today. I came right up against the edge of it. I'm happy to stick around a little bit extra and answer any questions that people had. Or if you would like to, please feel free to schedule an appointment with Career Services. If you have an nu.edu email address, you can use your single sign-on information to log in at joinhandshake.com/edu. Go to our Career Center page. You can click appointments. You can schedule an appointment to meet with one of our advisors at a day and time that works for you. If you have an ncu.edu email address, email me or contact us at careerservices@nu.edu. We have a particular way that you need to make your account. And so we'll send you information with a whole printout and pictures on exactly how to do it. It's not actually that complicated, but we just need you to work through it in a particular way. So if you're an ncu.edu email address student, just make sure that you get in touch with us and we'll get you the right information to get signed up. You'll have to use a personal email address to sign up as opposed to using the single sign-on. So don't use a single sign-on if you have a .ncu email address, because the system will not connect you with us and it will not recognize you, and it causes us some headaches. So just contact us and we'll help you get in if that's the way that your email address ends.
Thank you so much for your time. And if there is any additional questions, of course, I'll be emailing you all in about 24 hours with a copy of today's live session and the PowerPoint, which of course will have all of the information that you need to access these other awesome resources that NU has to offer. So until the next time, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Take care.